shortly after I was born, we moved to Baker City, and that's where I grew up. My father was quite an alcoholic, and he drank a lot. Early memories are kind of skewed. The most traumatic memory I have is being my father had a bunch of people over and they were drinking and I was in the way, so I had to go to bed before supper without any food, and I was really hungry. And I remember laying in bed thinking, how could this happen? That I'm hungry, and I'm all alone. And I can still remember how devastated I felt. As I grew up, there was this very adversarial relationship between my father and I that continued until he died. Yeah, in many ways I didn't fit in ever. I didn't go to kindergarten because we lived in the country. And so when I went to the first grade, that was the first time I'd ever experienced being away from home and playing in the creek and running around in the fields and stuff. And it was very, very unpleasant for me to be stuffed into a schoolroom with all these other kids I didn't know. And we went to music class, and I never heard of, music. It was just like, people singing it. I thought they were just hollering. And so I started hollering too, and they kicked me out of music class because I was disruptive. I was behind all the other kids, and so I got put in the slowest reading group because I hadn't had any kindergarten or anything. When you were reading, they teach you how to read these books. Look, Dick, see Jane, Spot, run, all that stuff. And so when you could read your first book, you got to take it home and read it to your parents, show them you could read. And so I took my book home and sat on my dad's lap, and I was reading this book, and I was just like going through the pages and reading it. And when I got done, he said, "Well, that sounds just to me like you got it memorized. I don't think you were reading that." And that devastated me. And from that moment on, I hated reading. And I never read a book all the way through until I was in senior in high school. And I was sick a lot as a child. I was always getting in accidents and broke my leg, broke my hand, cut myself, was in the hospital, had my tonsils out, had my appendix out, just was sick a lot and had missed a lot of school and had really bad, diarrhea a lot and just very uncomfortable. And then when I went to college, got away from home. This is where this thread begins, that I got away from home and I wanted to be healthy. And so spring term, my freshman year, I took a PE class called Fitness Appreciation. And this class, and because I wanted to get fit, I was never healthy, and I just thought, well, if I can get fit, if I can get exercise and get fit. So in this class, the first thing that we did when we got there was the instructor had us run a mile. And then he timed us, how long it took us to run a mile. And then the next class, he gave us each a piece of paper saying how fast we had to run 17 miles for the final in order to get an A, in order to get a B, in order to get a C, you know. And then you were on your own to just train 3 days a week. You were supposed to run 5-6 miles every other day, and preparing for your final exam. And I got an A in that class. And I went home that summer, and I was just as sick as I always was. I couldn't maintain. I tried to continue running, and it was terrible. And then that next fall, I ended up in the hospital with Crohn's disease, and that's the first time I nearly died. I was really, really sick. And even though I got an A in fitness appreciation, I was not well at all. After the Crohn's disease, you know, and the operation, then I went back to, my life was completely changed at that point. I just had no interest in the engineering that I was doing in college. I was studying chemical engineering and had a really good GPA, doing really well. But I couldn't see myself doing that kind of stuff for the rest of my life, that engineering. And so I ended up exploring. I started yoga, I learned meditation. I even became a meditation instructor. I studied with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of Transcendental Meditation, became a teacher of meditation. And this was in the 70s, early 70s. And it was a very hard time to be doing something like that. I can remember, you know, getting picketed at lectures I would give by Christians, and my parents were just completely convinced I was doing the devil's work. And so I didn't fit in with what seemed so natural. And just like the first time I meditated, it was like, oh my God, how come I haven't been shown how to do this before? It was such a profound experience of meditation, and my mind stopped, and I just went, wow. But because of my physiology, I was still sick a lot. I still had Crohn's disease. I still had all this turmoil and tension in my family. Eventually, though, got married, finished school, taught school for a while, but was always in and out of the hospital. And I had more major surgeries. I think I've had like 4 major abdominal surgeries in my life. And then in 81, this is when I got in this plane wreck. And it was, they thought I was going to die. I mean, I was really, really, both legs were broken, my lungs were collapsed, my neck was fractured, my jaw was broken, my clavicle was broken. I had all kinds of internal injuries, coughing up blood, and couldn't breathe. They operated on me for 8 hours trying to save my right leg, and was able to save it, or I had it amputated. They almost had to amputate it. And and then I got out of surgery, but I still didn't get better. And finally they flew me to Portland. I was originally in the hospital in the Grand. They flew me to Portland to the trauma center and figured out how to get my blood oxygen up. They gave me a tracheotomy, and finally I ended up surviving. But that's when both of my lungs were collapsed, and since that time I've always been like short of breath, difficulty breathing. I had 2 more abdominal surgeries after the plane wreck because it really irritated my Crohn's disease, and so I had blockages, and so I had 2 more surgeries after that, and was just had a horrible time recovering. I was in constant pain because of my fractured neck. Couldn't move my head. In 1989, 8 years later after that, I had continued to meditate and study the Eastern approach to life. Ayurveda began to be talked about, and so I began studying Ayurveda. And it made so much sense to me, but I couldn't figure out how to apply it to my life, and I was so sick all the time. And then in '89, I had just gotten out of the hospital from another surgery, and Deepak Chopra had opened a Ayurvedic healing center in Lancaster, Massachusetts. And I took all the money I had and bought a plane ticket and a week at this center. And that was unbelievable. It was a very special time because Maharishi had discovered that meditation wasn't enough for Westerners, that we were so stressed out that even learning to meditate, as in my case, didn't help us to alleviate suffering and to become more compassionate, happy people. And so he brought Ayurveda to the West. And Deepak Chopra was his spokesman. And he searched all of India to get the most authentic Vaidya's, Ayurvedic physicians, and transformed the ancient Ayurveda into an Ayurveda that would be applicable to Western people. And brought these doctors to Lancaster And Deepak Chopra, of course, was, he's probably, by now he's probably written 30 best-selling books, but at that time he hadn't written any, but everybody knew he was a brilliant person, and just very magnetic personality, very loving, very amazing person. And so that week at Lancaster changed my life so dramatically. When I came out of that week there, I felt like better than I'd felt in my whole life. Had energy, felt good, and it was so special because it was magical, in fact, because when I was there, the guest book had people's names like Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, the Beach Boys, Michael Jackson. All those kind of people went to Lancaster. And there I was there. And on the flight back from Lancaster to Oregon, they played a newsreel of current events in the United States. And 30 minutes of that was devoted to Lancaster, Massachusetts, Ayurvedic Healing Center and Deepak Chopra. And I was watching it. I just came from there. And it was like, wow. Every flight during April of that year, people watched that. And I was there. I did it. And I just started crying. It was like, oh my God. My whole life then, wow. It brought me to this point. I get to do this. Wow. How much better can it get? And I felt such gratitude for my whole life at that time. And I learned so much there. But when I came home, I started living my life the same way I lived it before I went there. And within a couple of weeks, I had manifested the same pathology I had before I went. Because we are a product of how we live, our personal relationships, our connection to Source, to the earth, to God. And if that's not there, there's no way you can be healthy, stay healthy. But I had this glimpse of what it could be, my second glimpse. My first one was when I learned to meditate. And then I had this one. But I had so many more tools. And so I went back to do that panchakarma, that healing therapy, 12 times in the next 3 years. And I learned, each time I went, I learned things that I could do in my life, change the way I eat, change the way I emotionally responded to people and events in my life. And the big thing I changed was how I exercised. And that's been the thing that has just been part of my learning, my gift or whatever. Because I always thought that that exercise had to be difficult. You had to, no pain, no gain. And what I discovered was, in Lancaster, there was a man there, an amazing man, John Diard, who later wrote several books, Body, Mind, and Sport, The 3-Season Diet, Perfect Health for Kids, and he became the director of player development for the New Jersey Nets the year they went from the bottom of the league to the top of the league. And so he applied the principles of Ayurveda to athletic competition. And it was all about learning how to be active and not engage the sympathetic nervous system, the adrenaline-driven fight or flight nervous system. And it was about doing less and accomplishing more. When I came back, I bought a heart rate monitor, and for me, it was an athletic event just to get out of bed in the morning, you know. And so I started applying these principles to just living, like watching my heart rate, watching my breath, making sure I always breathe through my nose. And I started walking, and if I couldn't keep my heart rate down, I would just rest that day. And if I could keep it up, you know, I would walk a little further. And I got so that I could walk more and more and farther. And then I was even able to run a little bit sometimes. And it was totally joyful. And at one point, I looked at how far I'd come using these principles. I said, this is amazing. And I was dumbfounded. And so I went to the library. That was before the internet, of course. So I went to the library and I checked out 3 textbooks on the physiology of exercise. And I read them, and it was like, it's all there. Everything that I had learned experientially was in these textbooks. The autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, adrenaline, cortisol, the Krebs cycle, that your metabolism was 19 times more efficient if you didn't use adrenaline. All these things was right in the textbook. But it never got to the gym. It never got to the gym. Never got to, so consequently, statistically, more people die in health clubs than in nightclubs. More people die exercising than watching TV. At that time, I was living in Portland, and I had actually moved to Portland to get a degree in psychology, and I never could get accepted into the program. And so, but I got some friends there, and I was teaching meditation, and I realized that teaching meditation, that teaching people how to exercise along with that would be more beneficial. And so I started teaching meditation and exercise together. And then pretty soon, I just saw how profound it was just to show people how to breathe properly, how to exercise properly, how to monitor their autonomic nervous system, that became my focus. And at first, I just taught people for free. I would just, teach people, and for free, and it was really profound. This one lady, as a kind of a dramatic example, she had really bad, severe leg cramps all the time. She'd been to all these different doctors. They tested her blood, tested her electrolytes, and couldn't figure out why she had these leg cramps. And so I talked to her and monitored her heart rate as she was exercising, and I could see she was just going into sympathetic dominance so quickly. And so I said, well, what do you do every day? She says, I teach school, and twice a day I have to walk from where I teach clear down to the other end of the school and then out into the playground to watch the children during recess. And so I said, okay, here's what you do. Every day you take twice as long to walk from your room to the playground, and you do this breathing technique as you're walking. And I never saw her again. And about a year later, I saw her in the bookstore. And I said, oh, hi, how are you doing? Oh, yeah, fine, good. How are you? Yeah, and I said, well, how's your leg cramps? And I can never forget her response. She says, what leg cramps? She had completely forgotten she ever had them. And I reminded her, and she says, oh, yeah. Well, they went away within a week. And she never had them again. And she had been spending all this money with these doctors for something so simple. And so I taught hundreds of people how to do that. People with heart disease that prevented them from having to have surgeries. I mean, all kinds of people that benefited from this. And I remember this one time, this lady came in, and I trained her in how to exercise, and she was so blown away. And her sister worked for Yoga Journal, and she told her sister about it, and she was a writer, and so they called me up and interviewed me, and that was my 15 minutes of fame. I got a 2-page article about me in the Yoga Journal. And so I've had lots of, I've trained athletes and lots of people to do that. And so I've kind of made myself a student of exercise. And in the Vedas clearly state, that Vedas are the source of the Ayurvedic wisdom of life, that the purpose of exercise is to take stress away. That's the purpose of exercise. And yet, as I was saying, in the US, more people die in health clubs than in nightclubs. So we've got a fundamental misunderstanding of what proper exercise is. And that, I think, along with some other kind of very basic misunderstandings we have about diet and routine in the West, is why we have such deteriorating health and increasing costs of medicine.